Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves podcast. We are live following the Timberwolves win over the Utah Jazz. Marney Gellner of Valley Sports North joins the show to break down the game. The Locked On Wolves postcast starts right now.
You are Locked On Wolves postcast, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. I'm joined by Marney Gellner from Valley Sports North. We're going to talk about the Timberwolves win over the Utah Jazz, and it was a big win. They, after a big bounce back win after a disappointing loss, to say the least, in Denver on Tuesday. But just hours before the game, news came down. There's a reported deal. I'm not going to list everything that's happening, but the big parts of the three-team deal with the Lakers, Jazz, and Wolves. Mike Conley reportedly coming to Minnesota. D'Angelo Russell reportedly going to the Lakers. A few second-round picks. Nickeil Alexander-Walker to Minnesota. A lot of moving pieces there. But this game happened just hours after, not even really, just like an hour or two after this trade was reportedly agreed upon. And the Wolves still came out and got a big win. But I guess, first of all, Marney, losing D'Angelo Russell hurts you offensively a little bit, but there's a lot to like about Mike Conley coming to Minnesota as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of moving. I guess they're not really moving anymore. There's a lot of pieces to this. You kind of have to digest it piece by piece. And the first one we're going to take is D'Angelo Russell. And he's kind of a polarizing player. There are a lot of people who love him. There are a lot of people who couldn't see him go fast enough. But I don't know how you could argue with the fact that his shooting has been incredible. And it was about December when D'Lo just started getting hot. And he had some massive quarters, and he had some where he didn't show up a lot. But that was kind of D'Angelo Russell in the full D'Lo experience, was that he could give you some incredible highs, and then he could go real quiet. But when he was hot, that man could get himself into a rhythm. We saw him go 7 for 7 from three, 8 for 8 from the field in the first half in a game just a couple of weeks ago. The Wolves will miss his shooting because he was an elite top-level NBA shooter. There's no question about it. Mike Conley is just a good, solid veteran presence. He's 35 years old. I was looking up some of his numbers just in preparation for the game today, not even before any of this trade stuff came about. So this was this morning. Mike Conley is in his 16th NBA season. And this season, he's having a career high in assists. By a lot, too. By almost a full assist per game. He's like 7.7 or something this year. So in his 16th NBA season, he's finding a way to assist players better than he had in any of the previous 15. And I feel like a guy who can do that at this stage of his career is something special. It still has a lot to offer a team. He's under contract still for the rest of this year and for next season.
Yep.
So, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, he's not a barn burner by any means, but he's a piece. And he is add on the 3 second-round draft picks for each of the next 3 seasons, and that's something that the Timberwolves desperately needed to get back into their arsenal. So if we're going to digest it piece by piece, I guess that's my first surface-level takeaway in what has been a bit of a crazy night for the Timberwolves.
I know.
And their broadcasters.
I was going to say, this came right before you went on air. And then, of course, there's a game to cover, which we will get to in just a minute. I've already recorded a lot at Locked On Wolves. We'll have a full episode on Thursday talking about this deal in more detail. But a couple of your points there, Marney, D'Angelo Russell is a high-volume three-point shooter and limitless range, and he gets hot. You can't stop him, etc. Mike Conley's not a slouch as a shooter either. He actually has better catch and shoot numbers than D'Angelo Russell does each of the last 2 seasons. I think actually 3 if you go back even further. But last season and so far this year, Conley's actually a better catch and shoot three-point shooter than Russell. Obviously, he's not going to be that guy who gets hot and carries you late in a game or whatever like D'Lo did. But that's not what the Wolves are going to ask Conley to do. That's not what he was asked to do in Utah the last couple of seasons either. Gone are the 20-point per game scoring days of Conley with the Grizzlies. He's a complementary piece now that can knock down an open three and, do things defensively, be a straw that stirs the drink offensively. But there's a lot more there too. He's also, I think he's only had one season since his rookie year has Conley shot below 36% from three. For his career, he's 38%. So like he brings a lot of things to the table in terms of consistency. D'Lo had a lot of highs and lows, and Mike Conley's more, level, right? And even if he's not in his prime like D'Lo, there's a lot to like here. And actually segueing, I think, pretty perfectly into this Jazz game, one of the clearly intended benefits of sending D'Lo out and bringing back a lower usage guy like Mike Conley is putting the ball in Anthony Edwards' hands even more often. And that was my number one takeaway from the Wolves win over the Jazz on Wednesday, a game that the Timberwolves ended up winning by 25. And they scored 143 points with no D'Angelo Russell, no Rudy Gobert, obviously no Karl-Anthony Towns. This was about Anthony Edwards and Jalen Noel having a ton of space to operate, and both of those guys got to initiate offense. They got to do whatever they wanted. Moving forward, the Wolves are going to give the keys to Anthony Edwards every single night, certainly with no Karl-Anthony Towns on the floor. And this was a really good example immediately, just hours after this trade was reported, of exactly what the Wolves are getting themselves into and exactly what they want to get themselves into with Anthony Edwards initiating things constantly for the Wolves.
And without Kyle Anderson tonight, too, who would be a guy who is also someone the Wolves have leaned on to be a point guard, offense initiator, however you want to label it. But you're right, Ben. It was a lot on Anthony Edwards tonight, and I feel like that is where we're headed. We've talked about this, I feel like at least once on this show, how Ant was not very comfortable with that in the last couple of years. He didn't want that, and now it's becoming more and more obvious that not only does he want it, but he thrives in that. And it's just been a great way to have him sort of initiate the offense, have the ball come back to him, just give the Timberwolves a different kind of look. He doesn't have to stand off ball, especially with someone like D'Angelo Russell, who does tend to put a lot of dribbles in the basketball. Mm-hmm. And all of this kind of changes that dynamic and maybe fast forwards the development, or helps fast forward the development of Anthony Edwards, because he's clearly ready for that responsibility and he clearly thrives with that kind of playmaking. So I guess I hadn't thought about that as a first time takeaway, but in watching the game tonight and kind of seeing it partly out of necessity, but then thinking, well, the Wolves might do this out of choice, not necessity, as we move forward. Mike Conley may not play the same minutes that D'Angelo Russell could, with Conley being 35. And the other thing is that Conley has played with Rudy Gobert, and when Utah was in Minnesota just a couple of weeks ago, I remember a couple people asking Mike Conley about the process of figuring out how to play with Gobert, and Conley was wonderfully well-spoken about how long it took and how they kind of had to figure each other out, and that he had to really adjust his game. It was pretty significant that for him to get to the point where he had a good rhythm with Rudy and figured out where and how to get him the basketball. So take that knowledge and apply it and hopefully hit the ground running with whatever chemistry the two of those two have.
Tonight's postcast is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. This year, the only app you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. Join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/LockedOn to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Ant was my #1 takeaway from this game, and I should also mention, you talked a little bit about Conley, and I think this actually works out. The Wolves played the Jazz, and we got to see this team play without D'Angelo Russell right away. And so this is like, you mentioned Conley playing with Rudy Gobert and their chemistry together. Something else that I talked about a little bit on my instant reaction show on Locked On Wolves is there's similarities to Donovan Mitchell and Anthony Edwards and how they play. And, obviously the Jazz were known for being a great regular season team and losing the second round of the playoffs multiple times over the last few years. But there's a lot of differences still between that Jazz team and this Wolves team. Namely, that Jazz team had zero perimeter defense. This Wolves team has quite a bit now with Jaden McDaniels, maybe Josh Minot. We'll talk more about him in a minute. Taurean Prince, guys that can defend on the perimeter. But Anthony Edwards and Donovan Mitchell have some similarities. Conley played a little bit of a lower usage role there the last couple of years as Mitchell obviously drove the Jazz. And then Conley and Gobert playing together. So I think that you kind of have a pretty good idea of what you're going to get with Mike Conley. And I mentioned earlier, less volatility. And also, I think from a fit perspective, Rudy, Conley, Anthony Edwards, and that's not even, I didn't even mention Karl Anthony Towns in any of that. And you could still argue he's the best all-around player on this roster. So, I mean, there's still a lot to like here. And we should also, going back to the game, we should talk a little bit. We talked about Edwards and the space that was created. Jalen Noel had a fantastic game. He had 20 points in the first half. It was good to see him kind of find his stride again after struggling quite a bit in the last few weeks. He started this game, was very, very comfortable throughout. And, it'd be great if he got going, and got back into that bench role as a 6-man type player for the Wolves here moving forward.
Man, if this is Jalen Noel unlocking something, that would be awesome, because he has needed a game like this for about 2 months. He really shot the ball well. I think this was his 3rd career start. It feels like he's started a few, but the Wolves have always loved him coming off the bench because of this instant energy and impact and how he can affect a game in that role. So there have not been a lot of starts for Jalen, and I feel like he knew he was going to get the minutes. He knew there was no D'Angelo Russell tonight. There was no Kyle Anderson. Anyone who was going to play any backcourt guard minutes, like he was going to get a ton of them. And he absolutely lived up to the opportunity. And the Wolves would love that production. I mean, just think about, he's gotten his minutes. They've been shrunk a little bit, but he has never been removed from the rotation. Chris Finch has always stuck with him. And if Jalen, I mean, I don't expect a 30-point night every night, of course, but
right.
if Jalen Noel could kind of get back to that, he's given you between 12 and 16 or something like that a night, that would really be a boost for the Timberwolves and something that would be sorely needed off the bench.
Yeah, and just the other night, Jalen Noel I think it was the win over Denver on whatever day that was, Sunday, I think. Jalen Noel was a plus 35 in 27 minutes, and we talked about that and how, I mean, nobody else in the Wolves was greater than a plus 23 in that game. In this game, Jalen Noel was a plus 38, and no one else on the Timberwolves was greater than a plus 20. And that's the good version of Jalen Noel that you mentioned, that instant offense off the bench, the energy, generally in this game, certainly efficient offense. That's the good version of Jalen Noel. And of course, we've seen the opposite of that too. But it's just such a weird, and obviously there's a lot of noise to individual single game plus minus, but it's such a weird outlier that has happened now 2 out of the last 3 games. We mentioned Josh Minot in passing, but
go ahead. Ben, the plus 35 from a couple of games ago was the career best for Jalen Noel and the best any one player had this season for the Timberwolves. So now that would be superseded by, what did you say, 38? Plus 38?
Yes. Yep.
I mean, and the Wolves won by 25. That's a big number.
Yeah. And of course there's, I don't want to, the deadline's Thursday. There's been some speculation Noel's a free agent after the year. I mean, who knows? Right. What happens? The Wolves now have some 2nd-round picks. There's been other rumors that, there's every possibility that Noel's positioning himself as teams want to come get him, or he's kind of trying to cement that role as I'm the 6th man. I've figured it out, whatever. I'm going to, he talked about, I think before the game, shooting form and, some things he thinks he's unlocked. Who knows? But we've seen the good version of Jalen Noel. And for a team that obviously has playoff aspirations, you need a scorer off the bench, and Noel can do that. The last thing I want to talk about from this one, Luka Garza, 25 off the bench, played well, scored a bunch kind of late in this game, but it was basically out of reach. But Josh Minot as well, a 2nd consecutive game where he played significant minutes. This was the first time he's played non-garbage time minutes, had a double-double, 12 and 11, and was good throughout. I was really impressed with his first half performance. He was so active hands, had a couple of rear view contestant shots, had a really nice block, a help side block, tipping potential offensive rebounds, keeping balls alive, stuff that this Wolves team has not consistently done this season. And it's that bouncy, athletic, long, lanky, guy that could play the 3 or the 4 and guard 2s. Josh Minot is all of those things, and obviously still very raw. And I have no idea if there's a role for him when this team's fully healthy. But what he provided in this game is exactly what the Wolves have been missing so often this season. Some of the same stuff Jared Vanderbilt gave the Wolves last year in a little bit of a different package, but that energy and activity and some of those things, Minot seems to be really good at giving those.
And you said the word bounce or bouncy, and I feel like that is the word to use for Josh Minot. Chris Finch used it in his post-game press conference too when he was talking about him. There's just something about the way he plays and the energy, and it's got a little more fluidity than like a Jared Vanderbilt. But you're right, that's a pretty close comparison. But we talked last night about having seen Josh Minot get some run kind of for the first time, some extended minutes in the NBA, not under great circumstances, but that we just wanted to see what it looked like. What did this guy's length and bounce look like in the NBA? And then you just rattled off about 5 or 6 things that he did that were impressive, that not a lot of teams have a player who can give them that. And I thought there was it an alley-oop dunk or kind of a fast break lob up kind of dunk?
Yep.
That Josh Minot took and kind of hitched. And it was so fluid, yet spectacular all at once. I mean, and it was just a quick and a flash. It wasn't anything like windmill and he just took the rim down, but it was just like this athletic hitch in the air before his dunk that made the people in the room who were watching the game with me at the time, everybody went, whoa! Like it just was that kind of a move that I think is part of the Josh Minot experience that we've seen the last 2 games. We've seen some potential there.
Yes, that activity, all that stuff is just it's just been missing. I mean, for Jaden McDaniels obviously gives you some of that in a little bit of a different way, and Ant, of course, is extremely athletic. But it's just that, like, it seems silly because Ant and McDaniels are 21, but like that youthful energy of Josh Minot, it's just another level of activity that they haven't necessarily had. All right, well, the Wolves take on the Grizzlies in Memphis Friday night. Hopefully Mike Conley, obviously things aren't final. The deadline is tomorrow. Who knows what all could change between now and Friday night. But the Wolves are at Memphis. Coincidentally, the other team that Mike Conley played extensively for. That's a 7 p.m. Central tip. And we'll go live about 45 minutes after that game, as we always do, talking Wolves Grizzlies. We go live on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the channel to be notified when we go live. If you can't watch live, though, you can listen on the Locked On Wolves podcast feed, any of your favorite audio platforms. We post this show after the fact on Locked On Wolves, so be sure to subscribe there as well. A big thank you for listening, a big thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.